Okay, here we go. Now we're taking a look at a Peugeot, and oftentimes, even though it's a French car, in order to keep the price within reason, it's actually assembled here in Thailand. Otherwise, it would just be ungodly expensive. And this one's coming in at about $60,000. So as far as cargo, a new car in Thailand, that's pretty reasonable. Okay, and that's $60,000 US, of course. And of course, we see that we're coming up here almost 2 million baht, and it's 35 baht to the dollar. All right, so this is a gasoline model, and the salesman was pointing out to us that what happens is they don't market a diesel engine in Thailand. That's interesting. Peugeot does not market a diesel engine in a passenger car or SUV in Thailand now for 2022. And many other manufacturers have held on to the diesel, but Peugeot has not. Let's walk around the Peugeot. Certainly an attractive vehicle, no question about that. And it is gaining some interest. We notice there's some gentlemen coming up to take a look at the vehicle. We notice we're here on a weekday, and some of these vehicles just don't seem to be getting any attention, but this one's getting some attention right here. It's a good sized vehicle, it's not small. So let's take a look here. Now remember, in Thailand we drive, it has right-hand drive. In other words, the steering wheel is on the right side of the vehicle. So let's take a look at this. This is quite a shock to someone from America, but if you're from Britain or Japan, this is what you're going to expect. All right, we're going to go ahead and slip in, and let's take a look at what we have here. Now I'm going to guess that this is using a ZF automatic transmission, most likely, and that's going to be an 8-speed automatic transmission, and I have shift paddles. Yes, shift down, and here we have shift up. So here's our shift paddles. Certainly we have a lot of controls. Volume, I take that's for answering my cell phone. This is going to scroll through functions, I suspect, on the display. There we go. And then we see some others. That's my answer the telephone. I guess I have list and SRC. Not real sure what they're talking about there. And here's my electric shift. Yep. No mechanical connection whatsoever to the transmission. This is my electric shift, and I suspect that's my manual. So if I want manual, I can shift manually, or just simply request park, reverse, neutral, or drive. And I suspect manual that I'm going to use my shift paddles, or if I notice that if you don't like the gear that it's in while you're driving, you can use the shift paddle at any time, and it reverts to the manual mode. And if you just leave it alone for a moment, it goes back to automatic. And I see the sport, and I'm sure what they're trying to tell me here is that's going to adjust the shift point and shift quality, and if available, I'm not quite sure what type of suspension that we have, that it's going to adjust my suspension. And I do see this control right here, so I have these features here, so I can have normal dry pavement, here wet snowy pavement. Here I'm on a steep incline or off-road, and I guess this is the side incline, and then of course I can turn my vehicle stability control off. And this normally is a function of throttle and anti-lock brake, so to help me maintain control of the vehicle. We have of course our push button start, and this probably has a feature where if I'm sitting at a light it shuts the engine off, which a lot of people find that kind of disconcerting. The engine just shuts off while I'm sitting still. I do not see a button right offhand to turn that feature off, but it may also be in the menu. Okay, we have a layout that doesn't really look unlike a BMW, but here I see my 12-volt power point and a USB port, or USB power I should say. So very nice. We have the full panoramic sunroof, and very nice interior, very nicely laid out. Okay, here we're looking under the hood of our 2022 Peugeot 5008, and let's take a look. Now we have a transverse style engine here, so I'm going to guess that automatic transmission is going to be, if it's the ZF, it's going to be the 9-speed. And let's see if we can take just a quick little peek with our flashlight and see if it will tell us what we got there. And nope, that's an ASIN. So this is the ASIN 8-speed automatic transmission. And so this is the same transmission I'd find actually in a Toyota Lexus. So, and certainly that's a good transmission. ASIN is a part of Toyota Motor Company. Here we see our little 4-cylinder engine here, and I see a turbocharger staring at me right up here in front. Here we see the compressor section. There is a bypass, a solenoid bypass. So what happens is if boost pressure exceeds a certain value, I just simply divert the output of the compressor to the input there to control the boost pressure. Now you'll notice that I have an oil line and a cooling line. So I have a liquid cooled and oil lubricated and cooled central rotating assembly. And usually they like to use the sleeve bearing, so it's going to be floating on a film of oil. Here I see the turbine section, and it's nicely covered up there with a heat shield, and there we see the pre-catalyst oxygen sensor. Now, one thing that happens is I'm extracting considerable amount of energy from the exhaust gas there as it enters and then exits the turbine section. So I'm extracting this mechanical energy to drive the compressor. So obviously the temperature of the exhaust gas is considerably higher entering the turbine section than it is leaving the turbine section. And you'll notice I got my oxygen sensor up nice and close. So that would probably be equivalent to the oxygen sensor being much further back on a normally aspirated engine. And here as we look, here I see the intake of the compressor. Here's the discharge of the compressor, and I'm heading down to an after cooler. Remember that when I compress the air, I'm going to raise its temperature considerably, lowering the density with the high temperature. Well, I might have raised the density with the higher pressure, but hey, they're fighting against each other. Let's get that temperature back down. So after exiting the air-to-air after cooler, I'm heading on my way to the intake manifold. And there, the intake manifold is tucked underneath the air cleaner. There we see the air cleaner. And there we see the intake coming to the compressor. Now, I'm calling this the air cleaner, and I do believe that certainly is big enough to house the air cleaner, and that's where I believe the air cleaner is. But I notice that my tube comes around to this assembly right here. So I'm going to guess that this is not an air cleaner, this is just my muffler. And you'll notice that my air intake is good and high. And here in Bangkok, we sometimes have flooded streets. And if you have a vehicle like this, you want the air intake of your engine to be as high as possible. Because obviously if I ingest water while driving on flooded streets, it's all over. But as long as that engine can get clean, fresh air without too much water, I can keep running, even though the water is up to the top of the wheel well. Alright, now here we see our powertrain control module, and I'm sure it's well sealed against the elements in water. And there's our 12-volt battery. We have, of course, the battery charger on it. There's my fuse box and relay center. So kind of a nice layout. Certainly, you know, as I look at that battery tray, it looks like that battery could be much larger, and that may be for a diesel engine, but there is not a diesel engine available in Thailand for 2022. Now I'm walking over to the other side. Let's take a look at the front of the engine. And what do we have? Here, of course, is our forward motor mount, and we see our belt there for the AC compressor and the alternator. And let's see, I have a water pump, so water pump, alternator, AC compressor, no power steering pump. So I believe this has an electric power steering rack, which has become real popular. And of course we see our coolant reservoir, windshield washer fluid. Now, I suspect the way this system is set up, I don't see a mass airflow meter, so I think what we're doing is this is going to be a speed density system. And so this is my manifold absolute pressure sensor, and it may be a combination manifold absolute pressure, manifold air temperature. I don't see a separate manifold air temperature sensor. But I'm going to estimate airflow based on speed density, frequency with which the intake valve opens, and the density, the pressure and temperature of the air within the intake manifold. And you'll notice this is the pressure after I have left the compressor. And of course I can actually use this as a type of wastegate. Instead of worrying about an exhaust wastegate, I'm going to use the bypass around the compressor wheel as my wastegate. And notice that we're calling for Mobile 1, full synthetic Mobile 1.